The night was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, pressing against every corner of the old house. Emily said, "Why is it so dark tonight?" Her words echoed in the empty hallway, her voice trembling. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chime loud and unsettling. A shadow moved across the wall, quick and fleeting, almost too fast to be real. Mark said, "Did you see that?" His tone was sharp, full of fear he tried to hide. The flickering light bulb above them buzzed, casting jagged shadows that danced with menace. Emily's footsteps slowed as she glanced at the blood-stained door at the end of the corridor. She whispered, "This doesn't feel right." The metallic scent in the air grew stronger with every breath. The sound of water dripping from somewhere unseen added a sinister rhythm. Mark said, "It's coming from inside." The door creaked open with a long, painful groan. Inside, the walls were painted with red streaks, like a nightmare frozen in time. Emily gasped, her eyes fixed on a cryptic message scrawled in dark crimson. She whispered, "It's a warning." Mark stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest, as silence swallowed them again. The air grew heavier as Emily stepped into the room. She whispered, "Who would do this?" Mark moved closer, his face pale, eyes darting across the blood-stained walls. A single candle flickered on the floor, its flame dancing weakly. Emily's voice broke, "It feels like someone's watching." The window rattled suddenly as wind howled outside, sending a chill through the room. Mark said, "It's not just the wind." His jaw tightened as his gaze fixed on the cryptic message. The words seemed alive, taunting them with hidden meaning. The candlelight cast eerie shadows that crawled across the floor. Emily reached out, her fingers trembling, tracing the edge of the wall. She whispered, "This is only the beginning." Mark exhaled sharply, his breath fogging in the cold air. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Emily's footsteps echoed as she moved closer to the cracked mirror on the wall. She whispered, "There's something here." Mark shifted uneasily, watching her reflection blur in the fractured glass. The candlelight warped the reflection, making Emily's face appear twisted and unfamiliar. Mark said, "Don't touch it." His voice was firm but laced with fear. Emily ignored him, her fingertips brushing the jagged edges of the glass. The reflection rippled, as though the mirror itself breathed. A sudden gust extinguished the candle, plunging them into near darkness. Emily gasped. It moved. Mark grabbed her arm, pulling her back as shards rattled. The silence that followed was broken only by their quick, uneven breaths. Emily said, "It's like the walls are alive." She stepped back, pressing her hands to her chest. Mark scanned the room, his jaw clenched, eyes wide. The sound of dripping returned, louder and sharper now, like nails tapping metal. A faint whisper echoed, though no one else was there. Emily froze, whispering, "Did you hear that?" Mark nodded, his hand tightening into a fist. The walls seemed to pulse faintly under the candle's dying glow. A shadow lingered in the corner, unmoving yet suffocating in its presence. Mark said, "We're not alone here." His voice was low, strained. Emily's breath grew shallow, her body rigid as the room seemed to close in around them. Emily whispered, "This place is cursed." Mark's eyes shifted to the message on the wall, his lips pressed tight. The dripping grew louder, echoing like a heartbeat. Emily clutched his arm, trembling. She said, "We should leave." But the door they entered now stood shut, locked without explanation. Mark tugged hard, his shoulders straining, but it wouldn't move. He muttered, "It won't open." Emily's breath quickened as panic took over. The candlelight flickered violently, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. The whispering returned, louder, circling them from every direction. Emily cried softly, "It knows we're here." Mark swallowed hard, sweat rolling down his face, as silence fell again, heavier than before. The morning sun broke weakly through gray clouds as Emily sat on the porch, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee. She whispered, "I couldn't sleep at all." Mark leaned against the railing, eyes distant, lost in thought. His voice was low as he said, "It's eating at you too." The chill of the dawn wrapped around them like a warning, heavy and unrelenting. Emily's eyes were red, her mind replaying the bloodied message on the wall. She murmured, "What does it mean?" Mark shook his head slowly, his jaw tense, his silence louder than words. A breeze rustled the dry leaves across the wooden boards, scraping with an uneasy rhythm. Emily said, "I can't stop thinking about her." The pain in her voice cut the air. Mark looked at her, his expression fractured by fear and guilt, his shoulders slumped under invisible weight. He muttered, "We shouldn't have gone inside." The cup in Emily's hands trembled as her voice cracked. "It's not about the house. It's about what's been hiding in this family all along." Emily sat on the couch, staring at faded photographs spread across the table. She whispered, "These pictures feel like lies." Mark stepped closer, his hand brushing over one of the frames. He said, "She looked so happy back then." The house was dim, curtains drawn to block out the harsh light. Shadows fell across their faces, adding weight to their words. Emily's voice trembled as she asked, "Do you think she knew what was coming?" Mark didn't answer, his silence sinking into the heavy air. A clock ticked steadily in the background, each sound like a reminder of time lost. Emily leaned back, pressing her hands to her temples, whispering, "I can't breathe when I look at them." Mark finally said, "We have to find the truth, even if it hurts." Her eyes welled with tears, and she turned away, her lips forming a broken reply, "The truth already hurts." Emily opened an old wooden trunk, dust rising like ghosts from the past. She whispered, "These are her letters." Mark crouched beside her, scanning the yellowed papers with furrowed brows. He said they're dated months before she disappeared. The handwriting wavered, the words desperate and unfinished. Emily's voice shook as she read aloud, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret." Mark's face hardened, his jaw clenching as the weight of those words sank in. The room felt colder, the silence oppressive. Emily looked up at him, tears streaking her face, asking, "What secret could destroy her like this?" Mark stayed quiet, his hands gripping the edge of the trunk tightly. Emily dropped the letter back inside, her sobs breaking the silence. She whispered, she was crying for help, and no one listened. Mark slammed the letter down on the table, his voice sharp, "Someone knew about this." Emily flinched at the sudden outburst, her eyes wide. She said, "Don't scare me like that." His hands shook as he tried to steady his breath, the anger in his eyes betraying the fear underneath. Emily's voice softened, pleading, "Mark, please, we have to be careful." The room felt suffocating, their emotions clashing like thunder. Mark paced back and forth, his fists tight, muttering, "Secrets don't stay buried forever." Emily watched him, her body tense, her mind spiraling. She whispered, "I don't know if I'm ready for the truth." He stopped suddenly, turning to her, his eyes burning with determination. He said, "We don't have a choice." Emily sat in her bedroom, staring at the framed photo of her mother. She whispered, "You knew something, didn't you?" Her hands trembled as she traced the glass with her fingertips. Mark leaned in the doorway, his face shadowed. He said, "She carried it to her grave." Emily's eyes glistened with tears, her breath uneven. She murmured, "And now it's crushing me too." Mark stepped closer, his tone low and heavy. "Well, uncover it, together." The old house groaned with the weight of silence, as if echoing their pain. Emily clutched the photo tightly, her body trembling, whispering, "I need to know why." Mark stood firm, his gaze steady, carrying both fear and resolve. The storm outside rattled the windows, the thunder rolling like a warning. Emily stood by the police station entrance, her coat pulled tightly around her shoulders. She whispered, "What if they don't believe us?" Mark placed a steady hand on her back, his voice rough. "They'll have to listen." The morning sky was overcast, clouds pressing low, painting the air with unease. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, the cold metallic smell of the building clinging to every corner. Detective Harris looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed as he asked, "You're sure about what you saw?" Emily nodded quickly, her lips trembling. The writing was real. The blood was real. Harris leaned back, folding his arms, his voice skeptical. "You're certain it wasn't staged?" Mark snapped. "You think we made this up?" His voice cut sharply, echoing off the walls. Emily clenched her fists, tears threatening as she said, "This isn't just about the house. It's about my family." Harris studied them, eyes narrowing, realizing their fear was genuine. He muttered, "Then we've got more to worry about than a prank." Emily spread the photographs across Harris's desk, her voice shaking. "Look at them." She was terrified. Harris leaned forward, studying the blurred edges, the desperate scrawls. He said, "These are warnings, but warnings to who?" Mark clenched his jaw, tapping one of the letters, his voice sharp. Someone wanted her silenced. Emily's hand trembled as she pointed to a torn page, whispering. She wrote, "I know what you did." Harris' eyes darkened, his voice dropping. "That changes everything." A heavy silence filled the room as the weight of the words sank in. Emily said, "She was reaching for help. No one came." Mark's fists tightened, his voice full of anger, and now we're the ones paying the price. Harris straightened, his eyes flicking between them, his tone grave. "If this is true, you're both in danger." Emily's breath hitched, her chest tightening as she muttered, "It's already too late." Emily sat in the back seat of Harris's car, watching raindrops slide across the window. She whispered, "It feels like she's still with us." Mark turned in the front seat, his eyes softening. "She's guiding us to the truth." Harris drove silently, his knuckles white on the wheel, his jaw tense with thought. The wipers screeched across the glass, cutting through the downpour. Emily pressed her forehead against the cold window, murmuring, "What if the truth destroys us?" Mark reached back, his voice firm. "Then at least we'll know." The rain hammered harder, drowning out their words, until Harris broke the silence. "Secrets this big don't stay hidden forever. Someone wanted to bury this." Emily's breath fogged the glass as she said, "And they'll bury us too if we're not careful." Mark's gaze hardened, his reply calm but edged with fire. "We're not stopping now." The car stopped outside the decaying family farmhouse. Harris muttered, "This place reeks of secrets." Emily's hands shook as she stepped out, whispering, "I grew up here." The house loomed, its windows like dark eyes watching them. Mark touched her arm, his voice steady. "We'll face this together." The air was thick with damp earth and rotting wood, the storm clouds heavy above. Emily hesitated at the doorway, her lips trembling. "I don't want to go in." Harris pushed the door open, its hinges screeching, saying, "If we don't, we'll never know." Inside, the scent of mold and dust wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket. Emily pressed her hand to the wall, whispering, "It remembers everything." Mark stayed close, his shoulders tense, eyes scanning every shadow. Harris's voice was low and grim. "Whatever truth hides here, it won't stay quiet much longer." Emily stepped into the parlor, the floor groaning under her weight. She whispered, "I remember her sitting here." Mark glanced at the dusty chairs, his face grim, like a ghost frozen in time. Harris scanned the room, muttering, "Someone's been here recently." Emily's eyes darted to the fireplace, where ashes still glowed faintly. She said, "That's impossible." Mark bent closer, his voice tense. "This fire hasn't been out long." Harris's eyes narrowed, his voice clipped. "We're not alone." Emily's chest rose and fell quickly, panic creeping in. She whispered, "Then who lit it?" The silence tightened, broken only by the crackle of fading embers. Mark gritted his teeth, his tone hard. "Whoever it was, they're close." Harris drew a sharp breath, eyes scanning the shadows, saying, "Stay quiet, listen." The farmhouse walls groaned as Emily stepped deeper into the parlor, her heart pounding. She whispered, "She hid something here." Mark's eyes darted around, his voice low, "Then we find it." Harris crouched by the fireplace, brushing aside ashes, his hand pulling free a scorched box. Emily gasped, "That belonged to my mother." The lid creaked open, revealing bundles of letters wrapped in twine. Mark said, "These weren't meant to be found." Harris scanned the first note, his brow tightening, muttering, "This isn't just fear. It's blackmail." Emily staggered back, whispering, "She was protecting us." Mark clenched his fists, anger in his eyes. Protecting us from who? The storm outside roared, rattling the windows. Harris's voice grew sharp. "These letters point to someone close, someone inside the family." Emily's body stiffened, tears filling her eyes as she whispered, "It was never just the house. It was one of us." Emily unfolded one letter, her voice cracking as she read aloud, "I know the secret that would ruin everything." Mark's jaw tensed, muttering, "Someone silenced her for this." Harris leaned closer, his voice cutting. "These are signed with initials. W." Emily's face drained of color, whispering, "Those are my uncle." Mark's fists clenched, his breath ragged. "He's been around all this time." Harris's eyes narrowed, his tone grim. "If he's alive, he's watching us now." Emily dropped the letter, her chest heaving. He was always too close, always hiding behind kindness. The sound of thunder cracked through the house, shaking the walls. Harris said, "This isn't just family business. It's murder." Mark stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Then we end it tonight." Emily whispered, "But what if ending it means losing everything left of her?" The stairs creaked as they climbed toward the attic, dust swirling with every step. Emily whispered, "She never let me come up here." Mark's voice was sharp. "That was to protect you." Harris led the way, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. At the top, the door hung half open, hinges rusted. Emily froze, breath shallow, whispering, "I don't want to see." Harris said firmly, "You need to." Mark pushed the door wider, revealing old trunks and sheets draped over forgotten furniture. In the corner, a chair faced the wall with ropes still tied to its arms. Emily gasped, "Someone was held here." Harris scanned the floor, muttering, "And not long ago." The air grew heavier, the attic walls pressing inward. Emily clutched her chest, whispering, she wasn't just hiding secrets, she was hiding from him. Emily's hands shook as she touched the rope on the chair. She whispered, "This was hers." Mark's voice cut through, angry. He kept her prisoner. Harris's jaw tightened, his flashlight beam catching a metal lockbox under the floorboards. He pried it open, revealing faded photographs of a man standing with Emily's mother, smiling. Emily recoiled, her voice breaking. "That's him, Uncle Martin." Harris muttered, "And he's been in the shadows ever since." Mark slammed his fist into the wall, shouting, "Why didn't anyone stop him?" Emily dropped to her knees, her sobs sharp, whispering, "She tried to warn me." The storm outside howled louder, rain slamming against the roof. Harris's voice dropped, dark and steady. "He's not gone. He's waiting for the right moment." Emily gasped, trembling. "And now he knows we've found him." The house groaned as the wind roared through the cracks. Emily whispered, "He's here. I can feel it." Mark pulled her close, his eyes scanning the shadows, voice tense. "We'll protect each other." Harris stepped forward, his hand gripping his gun, saying, "If he's near, we end this tonight." The attic lights flickered violently, plunging them into moments of darkness. Emily gasped, her voice barely audible, "He's watching us." Mark's jaw clenched, his whisper fierce, "Let him watch. We're not afraid anymore." A loud crash echoed from below, shaking the floorboards. Harris snapped, "He's in the house." Emily clung to Mark, tears falling as she whispered, "It was always him. The family's secret was him." The storm raged outside, but the real storm was now inside the farmhouse, circling them in silence. The crash from below echoed through the farmhouse like a gunshot. Emily clutched Mark's arm, whispering, "He's here." Mark's voice trembled but stayed sharp, "Stay behind me." Harris motioned them back, his gun steady, his eyes fierce. "He's not leaving this house alive." The wooden stairs creaked, each step deliberate, mocking them with slow rhythm. Emily's breath hitched, her pulse racing. "He's coming closer." Mark's jaw tightened, his fists shaking with rage. "This ends tonight." The air grew heavier, the storm outside slamming against the windows, as if to join the fight. Harris positioned himself by the doorway, whispering, "We wait until he shows." "You?" Emily closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Mom, give me strength." The footsteps stopped, silence gripping the attic like a noose. Harris whispered, "He's waiting for us." Mark glanced at Emily, their eyes locking, unspoken resolve binding them. The silence broke with the sound of a door slamming below. Harris whispered, "We move now." Mark nodded, his breath heavy, eyes blazing with determination. Emily followed reluctantly, whispering, "I can't do this." Mark turned to her, gripping her hand, his voice soft but strong, "You already are." The creaking floor groaned under their weight as they descended the attic stairs, every step echoing through the house. The parlor below lay cloaked in shadows, the dying embers in the fireplace still glowing faintly. Harris swept the room with his gun, his voice firm, "He's here. I can feel it." Emily's chest tightened as her eyes caught movement in the corner. She whispered, "Over there." Mark moved forward, fists clenched, his heart racing in sync with the storm. A chair toppled suddenly, crashing against the floor. Harris aimed sharply, shouting, "Show yourself." The shadows danced, but no figure emerged. Emily whispered, "He's toying with us." The silence shattered as a figure lunged from the shadows. Emily screamed, stumbling backward. Mark roared, slamming the intruder against the wall. Harris aimed his gun, barking, "Don't move." The flickering light revealed Martin, a man in his late 50s, his eyes cold, lips twisted in a chilling smile. Emily's voice cracked, "Uncle Martin." Martin sneered, his voice venomous, "You should have left the past buried." Mark's fists tightened around his collar, spitting words through gritted teeth. "You killed her." Martin laughed bitterly. "She wanted to tell the truth. I couldn't let her ruin everything." Harris pressed closer, his gun steady. "Step away, Ma." Emily trembled, her tears flowing, whispering, "Why her? Why us?" Martin's eyes burned, his reply calm, "Because secrets keep families alive, and yours was the one that had to die." Mark shouted, "You don't get to walk away this time." Harris warned, "Mark, let me handle this." Emily's sobs cut through the room as she whispered, "Please stop." Martin's smirk never wavered, his voice dripping with malice. "She begged the same way before I ended her cries." Emily screamed, lunging forward, striking his face. Mark pulled her back, his body shaking with fury. Harris pressed the gun harder, growling, "One more word, and you're finished." Martin's laughter echoed, sickening, "You're too late. The truth will destroy all of you." Emily clutched her chest, whispering, "The truth is you destroyed her." Mark glared, his voice low, "And I'll make sure you pay." Harris's finger tightened on the trigger, silence hanging for a heartbeat before thunder roared outside, shaking the house like judgment itself. The storm thundered as silence pressed into the farmhouse. Harris's voice was steady, "Martin West, you're under arrest for murder." Mark released him reluctantly, his chest heaving with fury. Emily stood shaking, her tears unstoppable as she whispered, "You'll never hurt anyone again." Martin's smirk faltered for the first time, his eyes narrowing with hate. He spat, "You think this ends with me? It never ends." Harris tightened the cuffs, his tone cold, "It ends tonight." Emily collapsed into Mark's arms, her voice muffled, "She can finally rest." Mark kissed the top of her head, whispering, "She's free now, and so are you." The storm outside eased, the wind dying into a haunting silence, as though the house itself sighed in relief. Harris stood tall, his gaze fixed on Martin, muttering, "Some secrets Shev stayed hidden." The storm had passed, leaving the farmhouse wrapped in a heavy, almost sacred silence. Emily sat on the porch, her face streaked with tears, whispering, "It feels empty now." Mark lowered himself beside her, his voice quiet, "It's over." The air smelled of wet earth and wood, rain dripping from the eaves in steady rhythm. Emily traced the railing with trembling fingers, her mind haunted by memories of her mother. She whispered, "I feel her here." Mark's hand covered hers, his eyes tired but gentle. "She would be proud of you." Emily leaned into him, her voice breaking, I just wish she could have told me herself. Harris stepped outside, shoulders slumped, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He said softly, "Justice is never clean, but it's justice all the same." Emily's lips quivered as she whispered, "Justice doesn't bring her back." The silence that followed was thick but calmer, the storm replaced by grief. Emily walked through the parlor, the air now cold and lifeless. She whispered, "This house is full of ghosts." Mark followed, glancing at the cracked walls, his voice steady but sad. "Not ghosts, memories." The fireplace was dark, ashes scattered like forgotten whispers. Emily touched the wall gently, whispering, "She tried so hard to protect me." Harris leaned against the doorway, his tone heavy, "And she succeeded. You're alive." Emily's tears welled as she replied, "But she's gone." Mark placed his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. His words were slow, almost a vow, "We'll carry her truth now." Harris's eyes softened, his voice quieter. "She gave everything to make sure you'd uncover this. That's her legacy." Emily closed her eyes, pressing her hand to her chest, whispering, "Then I'll never forget." Emily packed her mother's letters into a small wooden box, her movements slow and deliberate. She whispered, "These belong with me now." Mark folded the last of the photographs, his tone steady. "They'll remind us of what we survived." Harris helped gather the rest of the documents, placing them in evidence bags. He said, "These letters will speak for her now." Emily paused, her hand lingering on the final page, whispering, "She was crying for help all this time." Mark's hand touched her shoulder, his voice full of pain, and now her voice is heard. Harris's expression hardened, his words clipped. "Martin will answer for this in court. The truth will stand." Emily nodded, her tears falling silently, whispering, "Then maybe she can finally rest." They stood by the police car. As dawn light grew brighter, the wet ground reflecting pale gold. Emily whispered, "I never thought I'd leave this house alive." Mark held her hand, his voice steady, "You were stronger than you knew." Harris closed the trunk with a heavy thud, saying, "This chapter is finished." Emily looked back at the farmhouse, its broken windows staring back at her like hollow eyes. She whispered, "It'll always be here haunting me." Mark squeezed her hand tighter, replying, "But it doesn't own you anymore." Harris adjusted his coat, muttering, "Places like this lose power once the truth comes out." Emily's tears glistened in the early light as she said softly, "Goodbye, Mom." The wind rustled gently, carrying her words into the morning silence. The road stretched before them as the police car pulled away from the farmhouse. Emily leaned against Mark, whispering, "I don't know who I am without this secret." Mark kissed her temple, his voice soft but steady, "You're someone free." Harris drove in silence, the farmhouse fading in the rearview mirror, its silhouette shrinking against the horizon. Emily's eyes lingered until it disappeared, her tears rolling quiet. She whispered, "She's gone, but she's still with me." Mark's grip on her hand tightened, his reply certain, "Always." The hum of the engine filled the silence, the weight of the storm replaced by fragile peace. Harris's voice finally broke the quiet. "It won't be easy, but it'll be yours now, your life, your future." Emily closed her eyes, her breathing slowing, whispering, "Then I'll live for her." The morning sun spread faint golden light across the quiet town. Emily stood at the cemetery gate, her hands clutching fresh white lilies. She whispered, "I never thought I'd come here with answers." Mark walked beside her, his voice steady but low, "She's at peace now." The air was cool, the grass damp with dew, the silence broken only by distant bird song. Emily stepped toward the headstone, her eyes clouded with tears. She whispered, "I'm sorry it took so long." Mark placed his hand on her back gently, his voice soft, "You carried her strength when she couldn't anymore." Harris stood a few steps away, his face solemn, his tone respectful. "She'd be proud of you both." Emily knelt, placing the lilies down, her voice trembling. "I'll keep your truth alive, Mom." The breeze stirred, carrying her words away like a promise sealed by nature itself. Emily sat by the grave, her fingers tracing the engraved letters slowly. She whispered, You tried to protect me, and now I finally understand. Mark crouched beside her, his voice quiet but fierce. Your strength is what got us here. Harris watched them silently, the wind tugging gently at his coat. Emily's eyes glistened as she said, she carried a secret so heavy, and now I feel its weight lift. Mark touched her cheek, whispering, we'll build something new, something free of him. Harris finally spoke, his words firm yet kind. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought inside our homes. Emily nodded, her tears falling softly, whispering, but we survived. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone, whispering, I love you. Later that day, Emily stood outside the courthouse as Martin was escorted inside in handcuffs. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing like relentless lightning. Emily's voice was calm but firm as she said, the truth will be heard. Mark stood beside her, his jaw tense, his voice steady. This time he doesn't control the story. Harris walked ahead with officers, his voice sharp, keep moving. Martin's eyes flicked toward Emily, burning with hatred, but his smirk had finally faded. Emily whispered to herself, you can't silence me anymore. The crowd pressed closer, microphones shoved toward her face. She ignored them, her eyes locked on the courthouse steps, whispering, this ends here. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table, the box of letters beside her. She whispered, I'll never let them fade. Mark poured 2 cups of tea, his voice warm but weary. This house feels different now, lighter. Emily opened the box, reading her mother's handwriting, whispering, she's still guiding me. The quiet hum of the kettle filled the silence, wrapping the room in fragile peace. Mark sat across from her, reaching out his hand, saying, we'll write a new story together. Emily smiled faintly through tears, whispering, one without shadows. The house creaked softly, but this time it felt like comfort rather than dread. Emily pressed a letter to her chest, whispering, good night, Mom. Emily stood alone in her bedroom, the window open to the night air. The moonlight bathed her face as she whispered, it's finally over. She placed her mother's photo on the nightstand, her fingers lingering. Mark appeared in the doorway, his voice soft, come to bed. Emily nodded, her voice calm but steady, for the first time I think I can. She turned off the lamp, leaving only the silver light of the moon to fill the room. As she lay down, her eyes closed, her breath eased into steady rhythm. Mark lay beside her, whispering, you're safe now. The camera lingered on the photo of her mother, her smiling face frozen in time, before fading slowly into darkness.